Hi everyone, my name is Chryselle and I am a Christian of 2 years, so I consider myself to be a young baby Christian. First of all, I want to thank everyone for being here. I hear that the name of your group is called the Encouragers, which is very encouraging for me because I am not much of a public speaker. So right now I'm very, very nervous, as you can tell. I believe I'm here to encourage you, but I'm so glad that I'm surrounded by not just a group of Christians, because you feel like my family right now. Thank you. But also Christians who are encouragers, who can encourage me along the way as I go through this, and who won't judge me. Thank you again for being here. So let me start. I can give you a little bit of a background about myself. I was born in Mumbai, India, and I spent the first 8 years of my life in Mumbai. I was born to a multi-generational Indian family who was Catholic. Probably my ancestors were Catholic. So being a Catholic was very, very ingrained in me. The town that I originally came from is called Goa. And for those of you who don't know, Goa was a settled Portuguese colony. And so it was, all along the coast, the Portuguese settled and they built different communities, and they were all Catholic communities. And so the way our communities were built was we'd have a big church in the middle, and all the little houses were around the church, and everything centered around the Catholic Church. So we had events on Fridays and Wednesdays and Sundays. And my family was very involved in that church. So we went to church on every Sunday. Sometimes when I was a child, I would join my grandma on a Friday, and we do all the prayers within the church. The church was also my playground after school, because in Mumbai there were so many buildings. We didn't have a lot of places to play, so the church had a nice yard, and all the kids would meet there after school until our parents called us in. The church bells rang, and then so it was, like, again, very centered around that church. I got all my Catholic sacraments done. I learned to recite all my prayers by heart, so I could close my eyes and just say a prayer and just, recite it as quickly as possible. And I did this at a very young age. I also learned to do a lot of good works, so that was part of our thing. You do good works and then good things happen to you. And this was what was ingrained in me ever since I was a child. So if I do something good, then God will bless me with X, Y, Z good things. So if I wanted to get a good mark, then I had to do a good work. So I either had to do something in the church, or I had to say a particular prayer, ask a particular saint for help, or wear a particular medal, and then good things would happen. Right? I get that protection from God. But if bad things were happening to me, it was because God was punishing me for something. Not because I didn't feel because God was, trying to teach me something and trying to refine me by fire or whatever it was a challenge. No, it felt like I did something bad, so God punished me. So if I got sick or a family member got sick, God was punishing us for something, and the answer was to say a prayer or wear a medal, go get, not douse ourselves, but mark ourselves in holy water, and, then all would be right with God. I was also very into Mary. I was taught at a very young age that, Mary was the mother of God, and she was the mother of Jesus. So I do have respect for Mary, but it was a whole different world. So we prayed the rosary every night. I was part of a group called the Junior Legion of Mary. So there was a bigger group called the Legion of Mary, and we were considered this army of Mary because we were taught that in the end times, Mary is going to come down and she's going to vindicate Jesus. So she's going to create her army, and we were going to be part of this army, and then she's going to face and take down Satan. And so we were just very, very involved in that. Like I said, we prayed the rosary every night on our knees. We prayed it to Mary, and we were taught that we could reach Jesus through Mary, right? Because she was his mother, she was our mother, and she was the mother of heaven, in heaven. We also had a Mary statue at the entrance of our house. And this was like a big part of our upbringing. So anytime we'd come in and out of the house, we'd touch the statue and we'd kiss the statue of Mary. And if we, with our hand, and if we were far away from it, and we were in a rush, we'd kind of like blow it a kiss. And that's what we would do it every time. So Mary was a big part of me. Now, did I know Jesus very well? Not too much. I knew Jesus as a child of Mary, but I knew a lot about Mary. I could tell you, all the different manifestations of Mary, and Mary of Help of Christian, our Mother of Perpetual Succor, Our Lady of Guadalupe, and I could recite those stories. And I could recite a few stories from the Bible, the parables, which I really liked, but really reading the Bible was never a part of my upbringing too much. I remember my grandma once saying to me, we learned the gospel at church, so, whenever the priest said the gospel and a little bit, we'd learn that, but she said, I would never read the Bible. It seems so boring. So, which I later learned was incorrect. So if there's one book that's been very exciting to read, it's been the Bible. And I prided myself as I grew up. Even as a young child, I prided myself on being a good Catholic because I felt like I was doing all of these works that made me a good person. I was a good person, and I was better than all the other people because I was doing more works than others, and we'd help out at hospitals and stuff. So check, I'm going to heaven. And it made me very judgmental. So if I saw someone who was not a Catholic and who wasn't as fervent as me, I would just kind of look down on them a little bit because I would think, oh, well, maybe they're not going to heaven like me. So this is how I grew up, and this was my faith. It felt like it was a very strong faith, but I think when I look back at my Bible now and I think of the parable of the sower, I think that there were some good seeds being planted because I was learning a little bit about Jesus, and I think those seeds did take root in me. But all the others, I think, were not planted in good, rooted soil. I think they were all being scattered on paths. Because one day in my teens, some Jehovah's Witnesses came knocking at my door. And by this point, we had immigrated to Canada, so we were living in Canada. In India, we didn't know anything about Jehovah's Witnesses. We didn't have any in our neighborhood, but they came knocking on our door, and they asked my mother if she wanted to do some Bible study. And my mother said yes. And so she said, as long as we use our Catholic Bible, then we can do Bible study together. And they agreed. So they came and they studied the Bible with my mom. They had their own book to interpret the Bible, but they came and they studied the Bible with my mom. And I would sometimes sit in and listen to them speak. And this is where I learned that, things about Mary that I learned as a child that kind of kicked that foundation from under me. So I learned that the first thing I learned was Mary had other children. I learned that she was not born sinless because in the Catholic Church we were taught that just like Jesus, Mary was born without sin. The Bible didn't say that she was or was not. I just assumed that whole piece was in there in the Bible, and there was nothing in there about her being born sinless. There was nothing in there that said that she didn't have any other children after Jesus, because there were passages where Jesus' brothers and sisters were waiting outside, and then one of his brothers ended up, James, he ended up writing a whole book. And also that she was not sinless. I mean, this was really, really kicking out my foundations. And this is when I started to think that, okay, well, perhaps I was wrong in my faith. Perhaps I'm not Catholic. Perhaps maybe I'm Christian. But then I started questioning even more. So they would come over and I would start asking questions. And how do I know? Because I didn't know anything about Jesus. So how do I know Jesus is who he says he is? Maybe he was just a man who was deluded and thought that, he was God. And then I started kind of questioning even more. And I thought, well, what if there's no God? Like, how am I even sure that there is a God? And I'm doing all of these good works, and I look back at my faith, and these good works really didn't amount to any blessings as I thought they were going to be blessings, because, I was doing okay in school and stuff, but we still had our life challenges, financially, and there were challenges in school, and nothing really changed in my existence just from doing these things. And I compared myself to my friends who didn't have any faith, and we were petering along at the same kind of pace in life. So I figured, well, then whether there is or isn't a God, I'm just going to just live my life. So at that point, I think by the time I was 18, I declared to myself, There is no God. God does not exist. We're all just kind of accidental creations of evolution. You know, it was just complete chance and complete like random chance that we all existed on this world. It just so happened that certain particles collided at the very right time, and here we are. You know, we've just evolved from all of that. Now, looking back, I think, you know, even that belief takes so much faith to think that we exist right now and our world exists right now, and it's, you know, it gives us what we need. It's simply by chance. I mean, to me, that's a religion now. But back then, it just felt like, you know, I'm going to do my own thing. And I could say that my life took a tumble downwards. You know, I spiraled out of control in my personal life, and I really didn't. I just continued doing what I was doing. I was in school at the time. I went to university and graduated from university and got my degree in computer science. I was able to do a lot of traveling. Like, life was fun. It was good. It didn't. I didn't get punished as I thought I was going to. God didn't strike me down because I walked away from Him. But, you know, I was living my best life, all on my own terms. And this is when I became, I think, a lot more self-righteous than I even was as a Catholic, because I thought, I am smarter than everybody else. I figured this all out, you know. Look at me. And look at those foolish people who have faith in, you know, in the books I was reading, they would call them sky fairies. And my religion started becoming the religion of atheism. So, you know, people who had faith in God, they believed in a sky fairy. Words like the flying spaghetti monster became part of my vocabulary, you know, so I traded in, you know, prayers to God. I traded in the word Jesus for flying spaghetti monster, and yeah. And I think that though I was petering along, I think I was digging a big hole for myself. And, you know, I didn't know at the time, but when you take out God from your heart, it leaves a bit of a hole. And that hole has to be filled with something. And I believe that we're all searching for something deeper than just existence on this earth. Like, we all have questions. Where did we come from? And, you know, who's looking out for us? And so I was digging this hole. And I started filling it with myself. But at the same time, I needed to serve something. I think we all need to serve something. So I thought that I was being I thought in my own way that, you know, if I don't serve God, then who do I serve? And I think subconsciously, I just started to become a people pleaser. And I'm thinking that this is serving people. So I began to care a lot about what everybody else thought of me and how I appeared to everybody else. And I was feeling like a phony. I never felt my true, authentic self, and I was reaching out for that. And I was reaching out by looking at others around me and trying to get their approval. So if somebody told me one thing, I would agree with them. And if someone told me something contradictory, I would agree with them. And in the meantime, I was losing like little bits of myself because I didn't know who I was in God anymore. And this hole was growing bigger and bigger. And at the same time, too, I was still feeling very self-righteous, surprisingly. I can't explain it. I just felt like I was smarter than people. And as a result of that, when I look back, I think that I was being filled with that yeast of the Pharisee that was growing in me. Yeah, and I didn't know it at the time. And because I couldn't rely on God to fight my battles for me, I would fight my battles on my own. So when it came time to conflict, I was the worst at conflict. Even though I was such a good, nice, sweet, friendly girl on the surface, when it came time to conflict, the claws would come out. And people would say that. They'd be like, whoa, how are you? You know, I could cut you down with a remark and destroy you. I could make you cry just by looking at you and finding what makes you vulnerable and using that against you. It was the worst. I made so many people cry. I've made my family cry. I've made my mother cry. I've said things to her that I've regretted saying. But you know what? Who else was going to fight my fight for me, right? I had to fight my fight for myself. I didn't have anybody. I'm on my own. We're all on our own, right? So that's where I was going. But God did show me mercy, even though I walked away from Him. And I regret walking away from Him till this day. But God never walked away from me. He did show me mercy. He would send people in my path that, would tell me things like, I'm praying for you. I have two aunts in Vancouver who I love so deeply. And anytime they'd see me, they'd say, you know what? Try to find your way back to church. We're praying for you. We're praying for you. And I don't know why I felt so connected until today. I'm so connected to these aunts. Just people saying to me, I'm praying for you, impacted my soul. And at the time I was an atheist and I didn't even know it. And then in 2005, around then, I got a job and I was working downtown and I was working at a building at Yonge and Dundas. And there were a lot of, I don't know if you know that area, that's a lot of different like religions over there, and they're always handing out literature. So someone handed me something from the Quran, I would pick that up and read it because I think I was starving. I was really like not nourishing myself. Someone gave me a brochure about Jesus and how that period in the Bible from when he was young to when he started his ministry, that period's empty in the Bible because apparently he found his way to India and he learned transcendentalism. And so I started learning about transcendentalism because that's what the book said. I knew nothing about the Bible, so I figured, yeah, that could be true, right? And then one day, the Gideon Society, if anybody knows who they are a group of people and they hand out New Testament Bibles. So they were handing out these little Bibles on the street, and they passed me one. I just remember it was a lovely little white covered Bible, and they passed it to me, and I just took it because I was en route to an appointment. So I just took it with me and I put it in my purse. It was small enough, and I went to my appointment, and then I was early for my appointment by like 15 or 20 minutes, and there was nothing to read. And then I remembered there was this book in my purse. So I picked it up and I started to read it. So I started at Matthew, and it was my first time actually picking up in all my life. It was my first time actually picking up a Bible to read it. And I didn't, at the time, I just thought it was going to be like a magazine. But it was very confusing. There would be some very interesting things that Jesus would say. And he wasn't the Jesus that I thought he was. I thought Jesus was like this hippie Jesus, and he was like, he could be sharp. And it was, and loving at the same time. He'd call people daughter, and I thought, what is this? So I was interested, but also there was a big part of me because I was an atheist. There was a big reason why I actually started reading the Bible, because really I wanted to use it as an intellectual argument against my family and friends who were Christian and who would, bug me about Christ. And I could open up the Bible and say, look, he says this, and that seems like a pretty sharp thing. And it's contradictory over there, right? This piece here doesn't match that piece there. And I really was going to use this Bible and just show people how stupid they were, to follow. But that's not what happened as I was reading the Bible. I was becoming more and more interested in it. And then, sure enough, it just kind of happened all at once. My friend called me up one day, my friend from university who I hadn't spoken to in years, and we were chatting, and he invited me to go to church. It's a non-denominational church called the Church of Christ, and it was in a school. It wasn't even in a proper church. And he said, do you want to come down? And I was reading the Bible at the time, and I said, okay. I'll come down, right? I'll see what this church is like. And from there, when I went down, I met another girl who became actually a lifelong friend to me. And she came up to me and she says, hey, I work down the street from you in Toronto. So maybe once or twice a week after work, if you have questions about this Bible, we can study it together. So I said, sure, because I did. It just felt like Greek in a lot of ways, maybe Aramaic, Greek to me, actually. So we did. We were studying it, and we'd get into these ecclesiastical battles because I didn't quite understand who Jesus was. I didn't understand about why I needed Jesus and why we all needed Jesus, and I didn't understand why Christianity is so different from every other religion. I just thought, if there is a path to God, there must be multiple paths to God, right? We're all good enough. We're all nice people, and I just remember her drawing these stick figure pictures for me to try and explain, okay, here's a mountain and here's God. And every religion tells you if you climb this mountain, somehow you'll see God over here. But actually, we need that bridge to God, right? Our own brokenness. And So I did study it, and I said, okay, you know what, I'll keep reading this Bible. And I still didn't understand. And I said, okay, I will try and follow the Christian faith. And I thought, yay, I'm Christian now, right? And then she talked about baptism. And I said, well, I was baptized, right? I was baptized when I was a baby. So I'm good. I'm good over there. I don't need to do it right now. So I started hanging out with them. There was something about my Christian friends that was very different from all my other friends. They genuinely were just peaceful, happy people. They were excited to serve. And I just saw that they had this love of the people around them. They had this love of serving, and I just something about their spirits. I just wanted to be around them. So I spent a lot of time with them. And I would take my Bible with me when I traveled. So I was doing some traveling on my own at the time. I had some opportunities to do it. And I would take my Bible and I would read it while I was traveling. And I considered myself to be Christian. I was excited, and I became excited to follow Jesus. That was the first time in my life where I was truly thrilled to follow Jesus. And I felt this peace in me and this happiness, this joy in me. And I think it was my Christian friends rubbing off on me a bit. But anyhow, in 2006, in November, I went on a holiday to South America, and I was in Patagonia, which is like the southern tip of South America. And it's very wild there, and it's very beautiful and untouched by humans. And I was doing this like 1 month long hiking trip there, and I had my Bible with me, and I was so excited. I would read it like every single day. Again, it was a works. It was like, okay, I have to read my Bible. But I was reading it, and I was excited. And I remember walking along this meadow one day and just feeling the peace of God. And I said to myself, okay, God, I'm going to pick up my cross. Jesus, I'm going to pick up my cross and follow you. And I came to that conclusion there. I'm going to pick up my cross and I'm going to follow you. And then that a few days later, I was going back to Toronto. And I was very, very excited. And I remember landing in Pearson Airport, and my father came to pick me up from the airport. And then I heard this news. My brother-in-law, my sister's husband, has got a brain tumor, and he is dying. And this happened just a few days after I told God that I am going to pick up my cross and I'm going to follow him. And I was devastated. I said to God, why did you do this? To just give a briefing, they were recently married. They'd been married maybe for a year and a half, 2 years, pardon me. They were married for 2 years. And my sister had just had a baby. So my sister was on mat leave. My brother-in-law was dying of a brain tumor. There's nothing that could be done. And then I thought, I'm a Christian, right? And Jesus says, if you ask, then you shall receive. And I remember going to work, and, the people at my work were feeling very sorry for me. And I said, no. Jesus is going to cure my brother-in-law. I'm certain of it, right? I just have to ask, and it's going to happen. Because you know what? My brother-in-law is a good person. We're good people. We're following Jesus. So that's how it works, right? You do a good thing here, and then good things have to happen. Like you're filling up a bank. So God has to do this here. And I had so much faith, and it was getting worse and worse and worse. And then he was in the hospital. And I was like, no, there's going to be a miracle. I'm going to show you there's going to be a miracle. He's going to get better. And then his condition deteriorated. And then in 2007, in January, he passed away. So I guess I was wrong, but I thought God was wrong. And after he died, I was very angry at God. And this time, it wasn't like I didn't know who God was. I knew there was a God, but I was very angry at him. And I told him, you know what? I've done all of these things for you, and you couldn't answer this one prayer for me. So I just kind of walked away. I would just be a lukewarm Christian. I thought maybe that's what it is. Maybe I'm just really fervent and the devil is testing me. But maybe if I'm a lukewarm Christian, then the devil won't test me so much. So I said, I'm a Christian, but I'm a lukewarm Christian. And at the same time, I couldn't reconcile all of these emotions. And I met a friend at work who was a Buddhist. And he started introducing me to Buddhism. So I started meditating, and I started, again, going back to believing in that whole idea that I don't need God. Like, God is there. He's far away. We don't know each other. But I can do things by myself again, on my own. So yoga, the practice of yoga became very big in my life. I started reading a lot of Buddhist books and finding the Buddhist path that I was to take. And I just felt like, okay, I need to do A, B, and C, and then I can find peace. And I can tell you that, meditating or finding the now and, breathing into the present, these are good things because they give you temporary relief. But like I say, to me, I personally feel now when I look back at it, it's like a cheap form of praying. It's like when you order prayer off Wish, it's like you don't get that whole thing. It's it's just a wish prayer, it's just cheap. It's not fulfilling. It's very temporary and it's going to disappear. Sure enough, you're going to have to keep breathing again. And it doesn't change your heart. You are the same person that you were, but you're just breathing through life, you're just getting through it. And I just resisted. I resisted it for many years. I met my husband, Ian, who's over there, and we got married. And, it was real. I mean, I'm just very fortunate to have met him. He's just been a real blessing to my life. And again, like marriage is a very different thing because when I met my husband, I was quite grown up. I was in my late 30s and I spent my life being single. And I loved my single life. It took me to places and allowed me to do things that, as a married woman, I never would have a chance to do. And then settling down into married life was challenging to sit down and now be a wife. I was also a feminist, so women and men were at the same level and were equal. I was doing great at my job. Everything was going great. I didn't have to do anything. Being a lukewarm Christian, I didn't have to share my faith. So people would ask me, "Oh, what faith are you?" I'd say, "I'm a Christian, but I'm not one of those pushy Christians, so don't look at me like that, You do you, there are many paths to God. And then I had met, along the way, I had met a friend who I hadn't seen in a long time, and she was not a Christian. And we met for dinner one day, and then she sits down and she tells me that, while we hadn't spoken or whatever, she got pregnant. And she didn't want the children because she was a single woman. So she had an abortion. Now she was looking at me. I knew she was looking at me for something. And I don't know. I felt like she was looking at me for comfort because it broke her heart that she did this. And because I was Christian, she was looking at me to say something to her to help heal her wound. And what I said to her was, listen, I have my own feelings about abortion, but you know what? I'm not one of those pushy Christians. So you do you, your body, your choice, right? So that's the saying. You do you, and, I do me. So it is what it is. And then I remember coming home and thinking about what I said that evening, and I think God convicted me there. And it's changed me. I mean, it influenced me from that day on because I felt such remorse for saying that to her because I knew she was looking at me for something. And I just dismissed her saying, it's no big deal. Get on with your life, And there were 2 babies, right? There were 2 babies there. She was pregnant with twins. And I prayed to God and I asked him for forgiveness. And I said, please, God, forgive me. I shouldn't have said that. But I'm really afraid to speak up about my religion. I'm told not to say anything about my religion and not to be, pushy. There's, multiple paths, and it's not nice for people who don't believe to push your faith onto them. And I carried on in my lukewarmness, and I carried on trying my best. I was constantly trying my best, right, to what I thought was pleasing God, but actually it was to people please. And it was burning me out. People pleasing is the most tiring and useless thing you can do in your life because you can never please everybody. And if you put your faith in pleasing other people, they're also broken just like you. And they can never fill that hole, that deep hole that is needed in our life that can only be filled when we're in communion with God. And things were just falling apart at that point. I wasn't doing that great in my marriage. Work was becoming really intense because I was taking on more than I can chew because I wanted to prove to my bosses, and I was moving up in my career, and I just wanted to keep proving to them that, I'm worthy and I'm good. I was trying very hard on so many levels, and I was failing. and it was miserable. Like I was burned out. I just remember getting really physically ill from that point on, not knowing it was because of the stress I was putting myself under. And then I started reading my Bible again. I hadn't picked up my Bible in a long time, so I picked it up and I started reading my Bible again. So then I thought, okay, if I just do A, B, and C of what Jesus tells me and I please these people, then again, like I fell back into that mentality, then things will be good, right? God will bless me. I just have to do this on my own. That's what I did. I started doing these things on my own without God's help, without asking for help. And then I burned out and my life was a mess. And I won't go into too many details, but there was a point where my life was so messy and everything just fell apart and I didn't know what to do. Now, I went on my knees one night. I was just broken on the ground. It was in January of, actually it was in 2020. It was during the height of the pandemic. So at that point, the churches were closed, the Catholic churches were closed, and I did try to call a few, but they were closed. But I was reading my Bible and I was telling God, listen, I'm trying to do this by myself and it's not working. Like, what am I missing? Like, what am I doing wrong? And I was so broken. I just remember one night just on the floor, just crying. And then I managed to salvage something of myself, got on my knees, and I prayed the whole night to God. And I said, you have said that if you knock, then the door will be opened. If I ask, I will receive. I don't want money. I don't want anything. I just want to understand your word. I don't need a lot of people. I just need one person to study the Bible with me. I called a whole bunch of churches. They're all closed. It's been a few days. No one's responded. God, if you could just send me just one person to study the Bible with me, I'll be grateful because I don't know what to do at this point in my life. And I never felt so lonely in my life on that night. And this is where the miracle in my life took place. It wasn't, it wasn't like I suddenly won the lottery or people who were sick came back to life. But this was one of the biggest miracles of my life because the next day, my friend who had studied the Bible with me in 2006 and 5, she at the time, we kept in touch, but she had moved to Australia with her family, and I'd lost touch with her. And she called me up. It was completely out of the blue. She called me up the next day, and we had a chat. Thank you. We had a chat, and she said, "Hey, how's it going?" And I said, "Oh, I'm so glad you called me because, I've just been thinking I need someone to study the Bible with me." And it was over Zoom, and I knew because of COVID, I couldn't meet with anyone to study. So she set up a whole bunch of friends who live so close to me, and we set up a Zoom call. And over Zoom, this was in about May or June of 2020, over Zoom, we studied the Bible together, and it began to make sense. And I would pray beforehand, and I would ask God for help, not just me trying to figure it out on my own, but to have Him help me understand it. I started just throwing myself at Him and just depending on Him for everything. And so over the summer, I never met these girls in person, these women that she sent to me. I never met them in person. But over the course of the summer, they studied the Bible with me. And you know what? The miracle to me was that God answered my prayer, and He didn't just send one person to me. He sent an army of women. There were at least 10 women who came and who encouraged me and who studied the Bible with me. And by the time Thanksgiving Day happened, it was October 10th of 2020, I decided that, I am going to be a follower of Christ. And I got baptized, like full immersion baptism. And I can tell you, that was the best day of my life. And when I look back, I just remember one day, I had been waiting for my husband. Before I got baptized, I'd been waiting for my husband. He was going to meet me, and we were going to walk from work together and back to the car and drive home. And these Korean Christians had come up to me and said, "Do you remember the day you decided to follow Jesus?" And I said, I don't know. And they said, "Are you Christian?" I said, "Yeah, I'm Christian." "So do you remember the day you decided to follow Jesus?" I said, "No, I always wanted to follow Him, I guess." after I got baptized, I remember the exact moment where I decided to commit myself to Jesus and I decided to become a disciple. And I will never forget that moment when I got baptized fully in water. It was at Lake Ontario near my house. I had a group of Christian friends that came, and I remember going into the water and seeing this, like, kind of, it felt like I was embedded in a tomb, like buried in a tomb, but it was like, and I was also being washed at the same time, and there was this water above me, this layer of water above me, and light filtering down, and I just had to follow the light, and I came back up, and I felt clean, and I felt Christian. I felt like I was your sister. I was your sister. And when I came up, there was this bubbling inside of me. There was this joy inside of me. There was this peace inside of me. I wanted to shout it from the rooftop. I did not want to hide my faith with anybody. I wanted to tell everybody what Jesus had done for me, you know? I wanted to tell everybody how he healed me. He saved my life. He cured me. He heals me. And I get to start over, but this time, he's leading the way. I just have to go to him. I don't have to do anything on my own. I just have to follow him, and he will take me to where I need to go. And that day, my life changed.